Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming in a new Elden Ring build video. This time we are making use of fire and frost once again, but this time with the dual swords here, the Scavengers, fire and cold curved swords. These together alone are strong weapons, but buffed with fire and frost, that means you can be popping frost consistently, cleansing it with the fire and popping it again. Plus there's bleed build up and we can enhance it all with successive hits, skyrocketing our AR and enhancing that even further with incredible jumping attacks and enhancing that further. This leads to ridiculous burst in PvE and a really fun, genuinely powerful playstyle in PvP, which you might compare to just say running a bleed build. Basically this uses the chilling mist Ash of War on our offhand, and then with our main hand we use Flaming Strike, which is a great Ash of War to buff up with fire. Both of those have their own element aspects to them, and then they buff up your weapon for a period of time. So that's the concept. Let's talk about it now in PvP. So the build in PvP. As we are using two curved swords in the Scavenger swords, which are obviously top tier picks for that, we have quite a lot of benefits. These weapons come with just natural bleed, so you might get a bleed proc throughout that. That's what we're working into our build. Of course, we have the fire damage and the frost damage. Whenever we deal some damage with the frost, it'll build up, it'll pop dealing damage, it'll even reduce the stamina recovery they have and make them take more damage. And then we just have raw fire, which is a great element for just dealing damage. All of that combined is quite interesting. Occasionally you'll see a bleed proc or a frost proc or both, and then it'll just be a sudden burst of damage. Combined with power stance curved sword movesets, this is incredible in PvP for its running attacks and standing combos. We have better range than say something like daggers, which would be quicker, and that means we can catch people who are backing up and rolling and trying to avoid trading directly, which is a lot of people in PvP. I find myself just barely clipping people with these with the phantom range and just sort of chunking at health or building up those statuses, which is really nice. It might not be as ridiculous as say having two buffed up seppukus, but you're not dealing with the health negatives there, and the damage is actually comparable on your average bleed threat. So I've been shocked and impressed by this. It's been quite fun to use. It looks really cool too. Now, the basis of this build is to maximize the damage of jump attacks, which is mostly a thing we'll see in PvE where it's absolutely insane. But in PvP, if you can land those, is going to do a lot of damage, but admittedly it's hard to do so. Often someone rolls through you and you kind of miss them as you jump attack. So what I find the best way to actually make them land is to trick people into trading into it. So if I do a running attack and miss, or I just do a standing attack and quote unquote miss, then they go for the trade, I will intentionally trade with them, but my trade is the jumping 4 strikes of a jumping attack, which is enhanced by a build and will hit multiple times as well, which is going to be great. That is hard to do, but I have done it a couple times in my session, and it gets to like 1,200 damage in a burst, which is really good in PvP. For the ashes themselves, you won't be using them too much for direct combat because we really want to get those buffs up and then fight with them. So at the start of the duel, I find myself just chilling mist and then getting the fire on as soon as possible, or holding the flaming strike and using that to stagger someone and maybe hit them with the following hit. What's nice about the flaming strike is if you do hit someone with the fire aspect and then follow up with the heavy, you'll likely hit them if their poise isn't really high. And it can also work as a medium range harass, catching people in trades where you're just spacing out correctly. The freezing mist, I could imagine being used a bit more defensively, say in free-for-all where that would be a bit more relevant, but in duels, I just kind of use it to buff up or use it as a defense. It'll do like 300 damage and help with that frost build-up, which is nice if you can land it. Overall though, we are relying on the basic moveset of the curved swords and power stance and the really strong damage of bleed, frost, and fire, which is really fun and very solid. So I've been impressed with this. It's worked well today in PvP. Although I wanted to ask if you guys have experienced any weird lag recently. I play on PC and I've had these weird encounters where people just are standing there and then we DC, or in this weird clip where I'm fighting and I'm not doing any damage and then they die after I'm dead. But yeah, let me know if you guys have experienced anything weird like that recently. In any case, the build feels great in PvP. How does it perform in PvE? Well, as you might expect, as I said, jump attacks are the basis of this build. We're enhancing the damage of that as much as we can. So when we do a jump attack, we'll strike 4 times very quickly, land and jump again and do another one. This builds up a lot of damage in a short burst because this is a successive attack build. So the more we do, the more damage we do. Then there's the aspect of bleed, the frost buildup, and the fire. Frost will be cleansed by our fire damage, meaning we'll do multiple frost procs in an extended fight, like a boss fight. The DPS and burst you can get with this then is really good. As you saw, we're able to burst down the first New Game Plus boss really quickly. But if we say look at Godric in New Game, being able to one-phase this guy is always a good sign of a solid build in terms of DPS and output. And since we can just standing jump over and over while he's trying to cut off his arm, we can work our way through the damage resistance that he has during that phase. Then if we do kind of like DPS dummy as I like, which is Margit in New Game Plus, we're able to get towards 20,000 damage in a burst combo. And I think if I managed my stamina better, I could easily have reached that or higher, which is a really impressive number compared to say bleed builds that are somewhere between 20 and 30,000 on average. This build on the other hand benefits from having frost damage to, those weak to it, or especially fire damage in many sections of the game where there are enemies that are weak to that. Not to forget, there are also enemies that are like mega weak to fire, where they'll be hard CC'd by it, having sort of an on-fire animation going off. So I find it a versatile, good build for the idea of a playthrough. You've got the benefits of bleed in smaller numbers, yes, but it's there when relevant, and then you benefit from the elements of fire and ice where they come up, and they certainly do. The only thing I was wondering is how consistent will I be able to land these jump attacks, and there was no issue at all there. I was able to just reliably do it, just as a small punish window as well. So for PvE, very strong. Now it's time for us to explain the build then. So we of course have our two Scavengers curved swords, which are obviously really important, and then we have one in fire and one in cold for the specific affinities. Go figure, it's the fire one that's using the flaming strike Ash of War, and the cold one that's using chilling mist. Interestingly, this does give it B in scaling, but weirdly they both scale better with strength overall. So that's actually the stat we're going to talk about leveling the highest with this build, which is a surprise. We do want a weightless seal for our just self buffs, so we've gone with the Dragon Communio seal. There is bleed in this build because we do have bleed, even if it's a small amount, on the weapons. So when bleed occurs, we get more AR from our white mask, our headpiece, and since we are relying on jump attacks, ideally in PvE, we want to strengthen those using the Raptor's Black Feathers chest piece. The other two are purely based on maximum poise for their weight, so I've gone for the Tree Sentinel and Lionel's gauntlets. For the talismans, we have Lord of Blood's Exaltation, again with a bleed going on. Then we have Rotten Wings, Sword Insignia, and Millicent's Prosthesis to give us successive attack power as we land more hits, and the benefits of the dex of this talisman. Lastly, to further boost our jump damage with the Claw Talisman. In the Wondrous Physic, when we are using that, we want to buff up our fire damage, and we're going to get our successive attack power as high as possible, so we're using those tiers for their benefits. Then we have the stats, so we have 60 Vigor, 16 Mind to get to nice 100 FP, 17 Endurance is just what I could push us to. We're going to need that for our poise. Then, as I said, we leveled strength as much as we could. It happened to land at 77, but I wouldn't go higher than 80. We've got 20 dex, although it's more like 15 because we are getting that boost from the talisman. 25 faith for our two self buffers, and 10 arcane just so we can use the seal. Of course, those two incantations, as you might expect, a flame grant me strength to further boost our fire damage and physical, and golden vow for some defense, and again more AR. We pop those before any boss fight or probably in the arena to get our damage as high as possible. But there you have it. That is the build in full for both PvP and PvE, and the build itself explained. It's been great to mix things up a little bit. Bleed builds are obviously extremely powerful and common, but it's nice to see something that's actually, comparable in some way in terms of its DPS output and potential general utility in an open world playthrough that isn't just overly relying on bleed and bleed status. I continue to hope that in the DLC, whatever it is, they maybe make bleed a bit less relevant and make other things like element and other statuses more worth investing in. Still, a build like this does exist and it does work well, as you've seen. If you have any other suggestions for the build, then you can drop it in the comments. But for now, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.